Good morning, everyone. This is our second lecture on thermodynamics and kinetics of metal complexes. And in this series, we were discussing about different aspects related to the thermodynamic stability and kinetic lability of the metal complexes. So, in the previous lecture, we discussed what do we mean by thermodynamic stability and lability of complex. Then, what are the factors related to metal ion and the ligand which affect both of these phenomena. Then we discussed two methods for the determination of overall stability constant for a particular metal complex. So now we will continue that discussion today, and we will discuss few more methods for the determination of stability constant. So in the earlier lecture, we discussed the spectrophotometric method and Jobs method. Today we will start with mole ratio method. So this method is very much similar to Jobs method. Jobs method of continuous variation that we discussed in the previous lecture, and in that method we were preparing a series of solutions, keeping the volume constant and varying the relative concentration of metal and the ligand. So the this method is also similar to that, but the only difference is between the two methods is in the molar ratio method. The total analytical concentration of metal and ligand ratio, it is kept constant instead of the sum of the ligand and metal concentration. So yes, you are putting the concentration constant, but it is what in the molar ratio method we keep the total analytical concentration of the metal and ligand constant. So now in the same manner we prepare a series of the solutions, and we determine the absorbance for each of the solution. And this absorbance is determined by a good spectrophotometer, and you set the wavelength at lambda max. Lambda max is, it is the wavelength at which a particular complex under study it show maximum absorption. Otherwise, the metal ions and ligand they do not show absorption at this wavelength. So you can say that this lambda max it is actually characteristic of the metal complex, and it says that it shows that the metal complex has been formed. So stronger the absorbance at this wavelength, stronger the absorbance value that we get, greater will be the concentration of metal complex formed. So after preparing a series of the solution, and then getting the absorbance for each of the solution, now we plot a graph here. A graph between absorbance versus ligand to metal concentration. So this ratio we keep constant, and we the overall concentration we keep constant. The ratio then, but we vary this ratio. So this is Cl by Cm. We take it on the x-axis, and on the y we take absorbance, and then the you get a curve, and the straight line portions when you extrapolate them and they cross each other, the value of R gives the ratio of the ligand to metal ion in the complex. So from this value we can calculate the coordination number of the metal ion, or you can say how many ligands are attached to the metal atom in that complex. We can calculate it by this. Then let us see the graph. This is the graph that we plot in the mole ratio method. So here you can see this is on this side we have absorbance, and on this side we have Cl by Cm, that is concentration ratio of ligand to metal, and the formula of the complex MLN, it can be easily determined by this method. So the N value we can determine here. N is what? N is the number of ligand attached to the metal atom. So now you can see we are getting a graph here, and at this place if you extrapolate these two straight lines, we are getting two straight lines, and at this place if you extrapolate them, on this point they are crossing each other, and the ligand concentration which is corresponding to this point you can obtain by putting a perpendicular here, and from this value we can calculate the value of MLN. Then another method for the determination of the complex composition, we have it is the matching absorbance method, and this method is applicable for the determination of stability constant. So we can calculate stability constant for a particular metal complex by this method. Absorbance of two solutions having different metal to ligand ratio, they are measured at a wavelength where only the complex absorbs. So in all these spectrophotometric method, wherever we are using the spectrophotometry, we need to be careful about the selection of the wavelength, and it has to be the lambda max value only. Otherwise, the value, the absorbance value that we are getting from the experiment, they would not be correct. Because why they need to be so much accurate? Because that absorbance is actually telling us indirectly about the concentration of the complex. So all our experiment can go wrong. So one need to be very careful while selecting that lambda max wavelength. So in this method also we are measuring the absorbance, and we need to know what is the lambda max value. So whenever you are performing a spectrophotometric method, the very first step that you do is to find out the lambda max for the complex under study, and then after that you proceed for further experiments. So here also we prepare two solutions only, and both the solutions, they have different metal to ligand ratios, and then we get the absorbance of both the solutions. And the absorbance we are measuring, it is not it is a wavelength at which only the complex shows absorption and not the ligand and metal ion. The ligand and metal ion, they can have their own individual lambda max, right? But they should not absorb at the lambda max value of the complex. So at that wavelength you are actually measuring only the complex concentration. The solution showing higher absorbance, it is diluted to an extent until the absorbance of the two solution become the same. So you have two different ratios of ligand and metal in both the solutions, and there will be one solution which show maximum absorbance, greater absorbance than the other. So that indicates that this solution has greater concentration of the complex as compared to the another solution. So now what we do, we just dilute it, and we need to dilute it with so much of care, with rational dilution. We can bring the absorbance of this solution also to the level of the absorbance of other solutions. So basically by measuring the absorbance of the two solutions, you are leveling their concentrations. Now let us make some assumptions here. So that the concentration of a metal and ligand in the solution one is Cm1 and Cl1 respectively, and in the second solution we have Cm2 and Cl2. Now, suppose we have a complex in of 1:1 ratio. So we will have M1 will be equal to Cm1 minus Ml1, right? We are writing this for the solution 1, and L1 will be equal to Cl1 minus Ml1. So here Ml1 will be the 1:1 complex, and Cl is the total concentration of ligand, Cm is the total concentration of metal. So Cm1 will be equal to M1 plus Ml1, right? So you can rearrange that equation, and we have also performed this equation earlier in the jobs method. So by rearranging these values, now we are getting the M1 and L1 values. Similarly, for the second solution, we are also obtaining the values of M2 and L2. So in this manner, for both the solutions, we have now the values of M1 and L1, M2 and L2. Now when you get the absorbance of the two solutions and they are now become equal, now you have both the solution at the same level of absorbance. So that indicates us what? Because the absorbance of the two solution is same, it indicates that the concentration of the metal complex is also same in both the solutions, and that you can take as Ml1 is equal to Ml2 is equal to Cs, where Cs is what? Some unknown concentration that you do not know, right? Because we are preparing the solution, but we do not know the concentration of the complex. You know the concentration of metal and the ligand in both the solutions, but you do not know how much complex has been formed. So this Cs will be unknown to us. This is concentration of the complex in both the solutions. Now what happens? The stability constant K can be calculated from the stability constant expression. And now this expression will be what? It will be containing the Cs and K values. So how can you write the stability constant expression? This will be K is equal to Ml1 upon M1 L1. is equal to ml2 upon m2l2. So for both of the solution, we can write down this expression, and this is actually what concentration of product upon concentration of the reactants. So we know that ml1 and ml2, they are what, they are cs and cs, and now we will put all the values here. So m1 will be cm1 minus cs, and l1 will be cl1 minus cs, and similarly we will replace all the values here as well. And now, what do we need? We have to find out the value of CS. All the other values are known to us, right? We know that what is the value of CM1, CL1, CM2, CL2. We know all these values because we have prepared these solutions. So the CS will be represented by this formula. And when you put all these values here, you can actually get the stability constant value. Then the next method we have is Jerem method, and this method is specifically applicable for those metal complexes which are formed in the aqueous solution. So, if a metal complex is being formed in the aqueous solution, we can determine its stability constant by using the Jerem method. Jerem described the stepwise formation of series of metal complexes. Like suppose a complex of the composition MLN has to be formed. So it will be formed in different states. ML, then ML2, ML3, ML4, and like this MLN minus 1, and lastly MLN. So in the various steps, in the various stages, this complex formation is taking place, and for each of the steps, we can write a stepwise stability constant. So let us see what is the first step. So we have M plus L, ML. When the first ligand approaches to the metal ion, and the complex formation is getting started here. So we have the stability constant value K1 is equal to ml upon ml. So we have the reactant, product divided by the reactant concentration. Then in the second state, we have ml plus L. So it will be forming ml2, and you will get the stability constant, that is the stepwise stability constant K2, and its value will be product upon reactant. Then you have mln minus 1 plus L, so mln, and Kn will be equal to mln divided by mln minus 1 L. So in this manner, in the different series, in the different steps, we can sum up them, and we can get the different stepwise stability constant here. Now, how do we proceed with the further calculation? So let us see the equation for the formation constant that is corresponding to the first step. You can write it like this: ml is equal to K1 into ml. Similarly, for the second step, you can write ml2 is equal to K1 ml into L. And in this manner, for the ml2, you can substitute the value of ml, right? This ml value is what? You can get it from the previous step. So you replace this value here, K1 into K2, and this is K2. For the second step, we have K2. So K2 into K1 ml. So now what you will get? Will get K1 K2 L square m, right? Therefore, again you will write the final step. mln is equal to K1 into K2 K3 Kn L raised to power n and m. So this will be a final expression for the concentration of complex. Now, a function n bar, it is defined as the average number of the ligand molecule bound per mole of metal, and how do you express it? It is n bar is equal to, in this manner you write it, ml plus 2 ml2 plus 3 ml3, and it goes to n mln divided by m plus ml plus ml2 plus ml3, and it goes to mln. So n bar is what? It is the number, average number of the ligand molecules bound per mole of metal. Now substituting these values, now you know that you have obtained a similar value in the previous step. In the previous step, this we have got so many values. So we will replace all these values here in the n bar. And now when you solve this equation, when you simplify it and calculate it further, because this m will be cancelled here from the m, and you will see all the denominator and numerator values and cancel the similar values. So after performing the simplification, you will get this value of n bar, And this will give you what? It is the average number of ligand molecules bound per mole of metal. So it is not exactly the n value for a particular complex species. Rather, it is an average number, which is giving you of an idea what could be the maximum possible concentration of ligand per metal atom. So this equation is known as the Jerem formation function. And if the concentration of unbound ligand, if you calculate the concentration of the unbound ligand by any experiment, then you can calculate the n bar from this equation also. So n bar will be equal to Lt minus T upon Mt, where Lt and Mt, they are the total concentration of a ligand and metal respectively. So only thing you have to calculate is the concentration of the unbound ligand, because you are preparing the metal solution, you know Mt value. You are preparing the ligand solution, you know Lt value. But the only thing is you have to find out what is the amount of ligand that is not combined with the metal atom. So that unbound ligand value, once you identify by any of the suitable experiment, and that depends on the nature of the ligand. So if you find it out, in that case you can find the value of n bar, that is average ligand number. So a solution of the above equation for known values of n and their corresponding L values, they gives us the value of the formation constant. So for the individual formation constant, the stepwise stability constant, you can calculate them. And this was not possible with the earlier methods. In the earlier methods, either we were determining the composition of the complex, that is the value of the n, and otherwise we were determining the overall stability constant. So this type of method, the Jerem method, it is very important for those complexes which can exist in different compositions. And for all those different compositions, you can get an average number of ligand bound, that is n bar, and also you can calculate different stepwise stability constant here. So this is one of the advantage of Jerem method. Then an illustration of the Jerem method for calculating the formation constant for a complex between copper dipositive and 5-sulfosalicylic acid. 5-sulfosalicylic acid would be a ligand. So this example has been taken to illustrate the Jerem method. And let us see the procedure first. So the procedure, it involves the titration of 100 ml of each of the solution of copper sulfate and 5-sulfosalicylic acid with a standardized solution of sodium hydroxide. So now what happens? You plot a graph of pH against the volume of sodium hydroxide is plotted. Now you should note here that the point of inflection of the curve which correspond to the mixed solution. Now calculation of the horizontal distance between the curve, and they are used to find the values of n bar. Plot the formation curve of n bar against log L3 can be obtained by the values of L3 minus found at various pH from the equation shown below. So every time you are performing the titration, you are actually finding out the unused sulfosalicylic acid by titrating with NaOH, and you are plotting the graph. And every time after plotting the graph, like it has been said, like plotting the graph, when you obtain the value of L3 minus, you will just put it here. So the K2 and K3, they are found from the formation constant of HL3, which are 3.23 into 10 raised to power minus 3 and 1.81 into 10 raised to power minus 3. So these are actually the values of K2 and K3, and we can also represent them by the log value. So here we are not taking anywhere the log values. So this is a very advantageous process, because you do not have to indulge yourself in the complex calculations. So, but again, this is a lengthy procedure. So, from the potentiometric titration, you can find out the graph like this. You are plotting the pH against the concentration of the solution, NaOH solution that is used for the titration, right? So, this is a potentiometric titration. Every time you are plotting the concentration with respect to pH. And in the second graph, you can see we are plotting the n bar, that is average number of the ligand per metal atom with respect to minus logarithm of L3 minus. So in this manner, you get a formation curve like this. So the values of K1 and K2 found from the formation curve at n bar is equal to 0.5 and n bar is equal to 1.5. So when you have n bar 0.5, zero point 0.5, they are actually the value for K1, right? And when you have n bar 1.5, you get the value of K2. Then another very important method which we can use for the study of metal complexes, it is the polarographic method. And this method is based on an observation that the reduction potential of metal ion are reduced as a result of the complex formation. So let us consider a reaction here, MLN plus Xe plus mercury. The stability constant would be the K, and the metal is going in amalgam with the mercury, and the ligand gets free here. So basically here we are performing the electrolysis of the metal complex. And we know that what is polarographic method. Let us discuss a few things about the polarography. We are using here a dropping mercury electrode, and uh, a reference electrode is also there with respect to which we measure the potential difference on the dropping mercury electrode. So we change the potential and then we measure the current. And the reduction potential is what? So basically in the polarography, this dropping mercury electrode, it behaves like a cathode, and all the reductions, they are taking place on the cathode, right? So at what potential the reduction takes place, that makes a change in a polarogram, and that is how you identify a particular reaction. So polarographic method is also very important when we are studying the metal complexes. And this is the reaction that we have taken into consideration. So we have our analyte is some metal complex solution, and when you perform the polarographic experiment, this complex species move towards the cathode, get electrons from there, and it is reduced now. So what happens after the reduction? Now the metal will assume its zero oxidation state, and in the atomic state it goes into the mercury. So when a metal dissolves in mercury, you call it a amalgam, right? So amalgam is formed and your ligands are now free. So what we are observing here in the polarography, we will get the reduction potential of this metal. You will get the half wave potential here, and from that value you have to calculate the stability constant value. So let us see how do we do that. So above reaction, this shown reaction, it occurring in the two steps, and the two steps are what? MLN. First of all, K1. If you take the reverse of the K1, then you will get the formation constant, right? So this is the reverse reaction, and for the formation constant, you have to write it in this direction. This arrow should be in this direction. So in that case, your K will be the stability constant. Now at this moment, it is the decomposition constant of the metal complex. So MLN is equal to K1. K1 is the decomposition constant, M plus NL. Now the metal complex has dissociated, and after the dissociation, metal is now free in the atomic state, and you will get the n number of ligands which were earlier attached to the metal ion. So the metal ion is getting electrons from the cathode, that is the dropping mercury electrode, and it is reduced into its zero oxidation state. Now n ligands, they are also free in the solution. In the next step, this is the first step. In the next step, what happens now? This metal atoms, they are getting electrons and dissolving into mercury and forming the mercury amalgam. So this is the second step, and for this step you have a equilibrium constant K2. So if you take K as the overall formation constant, while K1 and K2, they are the stepwise formation constant corresponding to the respective steps. Also, you know that M is the metal, L is the ligand, and MLN is the complex, and the value of X, it indicates the number of electrons involved in the reduction. So how many electrons are required for the reduction of the metal ion? So a relation between the potential at dropping mercury electrode, the half wave potential, that is E half, and the current I, and the diffusion current ID. You can write this equation. This is the one of the expression that we get after solving the Nernst equation and Ilkovic equation. So this could be the expression for potential at the dropping mercury electrode. So this E half value we are getting from the polarogram. Then the values of I and ID, we are also getting them from the polarogram. And you can solve the Nernst equation and you will get the value of X. So now a plot of E against I upon ID minus I. It shows a straight line for a reversible potential. Now slope m of this line for an equation of this type, it comes to be what? 0.059 upon x. So once you identify the slope of the line from the graph, that will be equal to this value, and from this you will calculate the value of x. So where x is what? It is the number of electron transferred in the reduction process. So when you plot the graph, just get the slope of it, and the slope will be equal to 0.059 upon x, and x is what? Number of electron which is transferred in the reduction. So E half will be what? E naught minus 0.0591 upon x log k minus 0.0591 upon x log k1 upon k2 minus n 0.0591 upon x log L. So in this manner we can now elaborate the equation. We can expand the equation that we have just seen. And once you get the value of the x, you will get all these values, right? And E naught is what? It is the standard potential of the metal amalgam electrode. So that standard potential is, we can get it from the literature. It is a constant, and the value is always fixed. So you can get it from the literature. So this is the value which is known to us. The value of K1 upon K2. Now it depends on the characteristic of the electrode and the conditions during the experiment. N is the number of the coordinated ligands, and L is the concentration of ligand. So X value, that is the number of electron, you have already obtained that from the slope of the line, and now you can calculate the remaining values. So this is the graph that we get from the polarographic method. We are plotting these values against minus log L, and the point of the intersection, it gives you the concentration of the ligand that is actually present in the complex formation, and when you divide it with the metal concentration, you will get the value of N. So slope of the line which is obtained, it comes to be minus 0.059 n upon x, and now the value of n you can calculate it from the equation when you once you know the value of x. So here E half is 0.5 f. It is what? It is the half wave potential in the absence of ligand. Now when you plot the graph between E.5 minus E.5 s against the L, it yields a straight line, and intercept of which on the coordinate axis gives 0.0591 upon x, that is log k, and hence k can be determined. It is also clear that the slope of the line is minus n 0.0591 upon x, so that the value of n can be calculated. So this was the polarographic method, and with the help of that method, we can calculate the different formation constants. Then the next method that we can use for the study of metal complex is the solubility method. Now this method is particularly useful in determining the stability constant of the complex, which contain metal ion capable of forming a sparingly soluble salt, and whose solubility product is known to us. So in that case only you can identify the stability constant of such complex. Moreover, the complex form, it should be fairly soluble. So the same metal ion, it should form a sparingly soluble salt, for which you should know the solubility product, and it should also form a complex which is fairly soluble. So in that condition, when both the conditions are met, you can now determine the stability constant. Now, the stability constant of the complex can be determined by measuring the increase in the solubility of the salt caused by the presence of the ligand. So, whenever the ligand is present, you can determine the stability constant of the complex by just measuring the increase in the solubility of the salt. Now, how that will happen? How the solubility of the salt will increase? Because now more and more complex is formed. The salt is the sparingly soluble one, right? And you know the actual concentration that could go into the solution by just knowing that solubility product. But if there is a sudden change in the solubility, that reflects the complex formation, because now complex is what? It is fairly soluble. So when you notice that change in the solubility, you can actually determine the stability constant by that value. So let us take an example here. Consider the reaction of the silver acetate with acetate ion. If a sodium or potassium acetate solution of known high concentration is equilibrated at a constant temperature with an excess of silver acetate, then this would be the equation, right? So you have AgOAc. It can remain ionized like Ag plus and OAc minus, and the solubility product KSP, that would be equal to at the equilibrium position Ag plus into OAc minus. So this will be the solubility product. Now when the ions are combining like this, Ag plus 2OAc minus, so AgOAc twice minus, this complex would be formed, and this complex is quite much soluble in the uh, your reaction mixture. So it is it has a high solubility. So how you will calculate the formation constant? This would be the expression for the formation constant. So beta 2 will be equal to AgOAc twice minus the concentration of the product divided by concentration of the reactant. So once the equilibrium is achieved here, excess solid silver acetate, it is removed by the filtration, and then solution is analyzed for total silver. Then total silver concentration in the solution is given as. How would you give the total silver concentration? So silver is involved. First of all, it is in the ionic state in the solution, so you will write it Ag plus. Plus, it is also forming a complex here. So AgOAc2 minus. So in this manner, even if it is forming a salt, right? So it is sparingly soluble and exists in the ionic state. So you can write down the total concentration of silver by this expression. Then from the expression for the solubility product, now Ag plus is what? KSP upon C NaOAc. This would be the expression for the solubility product. Now because of the large excess of the sodium acetate, now the equation for the formation constant is what? Now you will replace all these values in the equation. So what was our equation? This was the equation of the stability constant, right? You have to write the concentration of the complex, concentration of the silver ion and OAc ion. So you will replace all the values here, and finally you will get an expression for the beta 2, that is the overall stability constant for the complex. Now since all the remaining quantities are known, you know the KSP value, it is a constant for the particular salt, right? You know the concentration of the sodium acetate, then you know the concentration of the silver because you have prepared the solution. You know all these values during the experiment. So because all the quantities are known, the overall stability constant beta 2, it can be easily calculated here. Then the next method for the determination of stability constant we have is electromotive force method. And as the name suggests, we are applying some EMF here. We are applying some potential here. So a metal in contact with a solution of ions gives rise to a potential E, and it can be shown here by this equation. You call it a Nernst equation. So when you put a metal bar in contact with its solution, in contact with the solution of the metal ions. The metal ions can be they can belong to any of the salt of the same metal. So it develops a potential. So how will you express the potential? You will use this equation, Nernst equation, and you can represent it like this. And the Mn plus is the concentration of ions in the solution, and M is the solid. So you will take it as 1, right? This is the convention. Whenever you're taking any solid concentration, you take it as 1. So if the two such cells with different metals are connected, the difference in the voltage of the two cell potential can be measured. So this represented what? You have to prepare one cell, and you will find out the potential on both the electrodes. So if you are connecting the two electrodes, you will get the overall EMF of the cell. And if both the cells are identical, the same metal, same concentration, the measured voltage difference will be equal to 0. So now let us take the two cases. If a ligand solution is added to one of the cell due to the complex formation, a net voltage difference will be observed. And this observed difference in the voltage, you can write it like how will you see the difference in the voltage? Earlier, even in E2 were the same, because you have same metal and same metal solution in both the cells. So earlier it was zero, but when you have added the ligand to one of the cell, now the complex formation has started, and now the what will change? Now the free metal ion, this concentration, it will be changed, because some of the metal ion, they will be involved in the complex formation. So a change in the concentration of metal ions, because now they are involved in the complex formation, this will change the potential on that cell. And the change in the potential E observed, you will write it like E1 minus E2 is equal to minus RT upon NF ln of M2 plus uh, 1 in the first cell, right? Divided by, because all these values are in the logarithmic value. So you will write it by dividing one from the other. So now you will take the second portion in which you have the ln of M2 plus 2 divided by M solid. So this is the expression for the E observed, the change observed difference in the voltage. Now all the signs they have, all the symbols they have the usual meaning, like T is the absolute temperature here, R is the gas constant, F is the Faraday constant, N is the number of electron transferred, and therefore the observed voltage is directly related to the free ion concentration in the cell. So in the actual experiments, fixed volume of ligand is added successively to the metal ion solution in one cell, and the corresponding voltage is measured. The stability constant can be evaluated from the knowledge of the total concentration of the metal ion ligand and uncomplexed metal ion. So this was about the different methods which we can use to study the different aspects of a particular metal complex. Now let us see, when the complex formation takes place, what are the potential energy changes, and what type of reaction can be involved in the during the formation of the metal complex. Like right now we have seen, what do you mean by the metal stability constants, different type of metal stability constant, and how we can determine them. Now what are the changes during the formation? Let us see them. So first of all, take an example here. Just consider a reaction that is A plus B, A plus BC. BC is the ligand, and now what happens? It is forming AB plus C. So you can say that the B is actually substituted over the A. So in this reaction, the species A and BC, they are what? They are the reactant. On this side, left hand side, we have reactants, and on the right hand side, the AB and C, they are what? They are the products. Then potential energy changes they involved during this transformation, they are presented graphically in two figures. Now from the figures, it can be seen that the reactants are converted into the products through a transition state. Whenever any chemical reaction is taking place, always you have certain transition state involved into that. And if it has a sufficient lifetime, sufficiently longer lifetime, we just call it an intermediate species. So a transition state is always there, which can be characterized by that a few bonds have been broken in the reactant, and and some new bonds have been formed. But yet, the species is not the reactant and not the product. Both of the it may have similarity in its structure to any of them, but the react it is no longer a reactant now, and the product is still not formed. So in between these two phases, the reactant product, the species that exists between them uh, during the course of the reaction, you call it a transition state. So the figure, the potential energy diagram we can use to see what would be the structure of that activated complex. So this activated complex is a high energy molecule, you can say, and it has partial bonds. Like I said, some bonds have been broken in the reactant, and some new bonds have been formed partially. So it is having very high energy and a very short lifespan. So it is not a true molecule actually, and cannot be isolated because it is having very low stability. So energy which is required to be for the formation of the activated complex. Because now the reactants, they are attaining some energy and they are converting themselves into the activated complex, or you can see the transition state. And after crossing the activation energy barrier, now the reactants are converting into products. So how much energy is required for this activated complex? You can calculate it by the difference between energy of the reactant and energy of the activated complex. So all this thing we are going to see in the next slide in the diagram. The energy, it is known as the activation energy. Like I told you, activation energy is actually what the reactant molecule has to acquire that much amount of energy if the reaction has to take place. Otherwise, if the activation energy cannot be attained by the reactant molecule, reaction is not possible at all. So once the activated energy is attained by the reactant molecule, now it is converted into what? Activated complex. And quickly the activated complex loses its energy. Some new bonds have been formed, few bonds are broken, and soon it is converted into product molecule. So what happens now? From the two figures which I am going to show you, we can see that you can find out from these figures potential energy diagram that whether the reaction is endothermic or exothermic. Endothermic reaction is which is characterized by a net absorption of energy. Only then it takes place. And exothermic reaction is which is releasing the energy. You call it exothermic reaction. So the reactant molecule must require the activation energy for successful transformation. Whatever type of reaction it is, the activation energy barrier, it needs to be crossed. So let us see. This is the diagram, and here you can see we have two potential energy diagrams. So first diagram represent the endothermic reaction, and second represent the first represent the exothermic reaction, and second represent endothermic reaction. So in this potential energy diagram, on the y-axis we have potential energy for both the diagrams, and this is the reactant A plus BC. This is the reactant molecule, and now you can see that this is the A, B, C. This is the activated complex which is formed during the course of the reaction, and the reactant molecules, they have to cross this activation energy barrier. Once it is crossed, now it is quickly converted into product, and the product is AB plus C. So you can see that here from the values of the potential energy, reactant molecule is having higher energy as compared to the product molecule. So when it is going to the product, when it is transforming itself into the product, it has to lower down it this much amount of energy. And this energy will be what? It is the heat of the reaction. So if the product is having lesser energy, then there will be overall evolution of the heat. This much amount of heat will be released by the reactant molecule so as to reach to the state of energy state of the product. So because there is a net evolution of the potential energy in the form of heat, you call it exothermic reaction. And in the second graph, you can see this is the graph for endothermic reaction, and now you can see that this is the reactant molecule passing through the activation energy barrier by forming the activated complex and getting converted into the product. So now you can see that the energy of the reactant is lower than the energy of the product. So in order to transform itself into the product molecule, this much amount of energy is required by the reactant. So to go to a higher energy structural state, it has to absorb some energy. This will be your heat of the reaction, and when such reaction will be performed, there will be overall absorption of the heat during the reaction. So such reactions are called the endothermic reactions. So these are the two potential energy diagrams which are characteristic for exothermic and endothermic reactions. Now, in the reactant molecule, some bonds are broken and some new bonds are formed, and you call it the substrate. And BC is the substrate in the reaction. When the reaction proceeds, this A molecule, it attacks on the substrate, and hence the A species in the reaction is called the attacking reagent. Now this attacking reagent, it can be if it is looking for the electrons. Suppose it is carrying some positive charge, so you call it a electrophile, because now in order to get stability, it is looking for the electrons. Like it can be the nitrosonium ion or bromonium ion, anything. It is deficient in the electron and they are looking for the electron from any of the species. So they will attempt the electrophilic substitution reaction on the substrate. Then, commonly in the coordination chemistry, the attacking reagents are nucleus loving. And nucleus loving means they have excess of electrons with them, and they want to give it to some positively charged species. So they are looking for some nucleus, and that is why they are called the nucleophiles, like chloroligand, hydroxyligand, and cyanoligand. They all contain a pair of electron, and they want to donate it. They are electron rich, and they tend to replace some other ligand on the substrate molecule by nucleophilic substitution reaction. So this was all about for this lecture, and today we discussed about how the metal complexes are formed and how we can identify their different aspects using different methods, and what are the key characteristics of the conversion of a metal into metal complex. So we discussed about the exothermic and endothermic reaction and how electrophilic and nucleophilic attacks take place on the metal complex. In the coming lectures, we will discuss the detailed mechanism of nucleophilic substitutions of metal complexes. So that is all from my side for today. Thank you so much.